Hello, everybody. This is Eric Navas, and this is Identity Snatchers audiobook, Chapter 2, Ignoring the Cracks. Ignoring the Cracks. As I stared at myself in the mirror of self-examination, the mirror began cracking under all the pressure to conform. In spite of the objections conveyed to me by my grandmother, my mother, and my father before he passed away, I continued on in the group. I ignored their warnings. I refused to read the newspaper article sent to me about UBF. I left the book given to me by my mother unread. The book was Breaking the Chains, Understanding Religious Addiction and Religious Abuse by Father Leo Booth, 1989. I have this book now and highly recommend it. One of the reasons my mirror of self-examination started to crack is because I was being Koreanized. A survey by a longtime UBF staff member asked UBF people how they would describe their ministry in one word. The most often repeated word was this: Korean. The Korean missionaries typically do not like public attention. So the front groups on university campuses are set up with native people, usually without any Koreans. A common mistake among missionaries going to other lands is that they impose their own culture onto the host country. At UBF, this problem goes much deeper. On one hand, the UBF missionaries have indeed Koreanized the people they have hoped to evangelize. They have also done something even more harmful. They have created a new culture that allows abuse of all kinds to flourish, especially the abuse of power. The philosophical foundation of this new UBF culture is created by 6 practices found in nearly every UBF chapter worldwide. The various weekly programs and practices may vary greatly from chapter to chapter, but they have these methods in common. They redefine your mindset, rewire your language, reroute your finances, rebrand your spirituality, repurpose your relationships, and redirect your emotions. Such influential actions create a unique culture called UBFism. Because this new culture is focused solely on keeping the UBF system going, the culture naturally becomes blind to abuse. Those who love power and seek authority over others rise to top in such a culture as long as they propagate UBFism. In this chapter, I explain the cultural aspect of UBFism. When the concept of UBFism is understood, the apparent contradictions begin to dissolve. To understand the group well, you simply drop that assumption that UBF wants to spread the gospel and replace it with the assumption that UBF wants to spread UBFism. Then everything they do and teach makes sense. People at UBF do use the term gospel, but are often confused about what the gospel actually means. When pressed to discuss further, they tend to see such things as a waste of time and as something preventing them from doing their UBF activities. From the very beginning, UBF was not interested in the gospel, but in inventing their own distinct brand of shepherding theology. Now they are trying to preserve that idea they created and are so proud of. That's really all that is needed to understand what's going on. The continual orientation amounts to refreshing your familiarity with UBFism. And as you become more entwined with UBFism, your life cracks more and more under the pressure. Redefining your mindset. My family was, quote, my family was concerned because they saw that the psychological abuse was insidious in this group. They believed that I was being coerced and unduly influenced into doing things that I would not normally do. I won't go into details of such for brevity's sake. They took these drastic and desperate measures only after numerous attempts at calmly talking to me about what the concerns were. Because of the UBF mindset that I was in at the time, I would not even listen to, much less consider such concerns. The reason for this had to do with the mind control techniques that were and still seem to be utilized to keep people in UBF. Through UBF teachings, one comes to believe that people outside of UBF are less than spiritual, and anyone who questions what is going on in UBF are enemies of God. End quote. anonymous former Cincinnati UBF member. The primary mindset of UBFism is that your old life before UBF is bad and your new life in UBF is good. Outsiders are bad or weak. Insiders are good and strong. This is initiated by a well-known and effective method of cults called, quote-unquote, love bombing. The prospective members or a struggling current member are overwhelmed, virtually, quote-unquote, bombed with love. They get attention, all kinds of compliments, care, practical help, free meals, etc. Most people cannot cope with this sudden shower of attention and love. Often they get addicted to it very quickly and want to enjoy more of it. They engage in more and more activities with the group, having more and more fellowship with the people there, taking on more and more obligations, and simultaneously reducing the time spent in former hobbies and fellowship with friends and relatives. The mindset you eventually adapt is that leaving UBF is bad. Tremendous fear about leaving is instilled week after week. The mindset becomes a combination of loving the flattery and praise of the group and fearing the results of leaving that group. At regular intervals, you are reminded that something terrible will happen if you ever leave the group. For example, here are some quotes from lectures by Samuel Lee about leaving the group. Quote, "He abandoned God's mission and bought a good house in the suburbs. As soon as he moved into an overly luxurious house for him, he was attacked by liver cancer and died after 6 months." End quote. Quote, another one, influenced by American relativism, cursed the servant of God. Then he left UBF. After several years, he was in a severe car accident. His body was totally crushed and his hands and feet were paralyzed. End quote. The original quote-unquote good news of the group has now definitely developed into a quote-unquote threatening message. The fear that after leaving something terrible will happen or that they cannot cope with their lives without the group anymore is breathing down the necks of the members. Even after leaving, most of them have to struggle with such fears. Often it is actually difficult for former members to find their place again in real life and society without the group. Instead of ignoring serious problems to attend UBF activities, the former member has to face the problems of life directly. In the majority of cases, former members come to realize how drastically their own interests, their studies, education, professional development, financial security, friendships, family, have all been neglected with the mindset that UBF is good, personal hobbies are bad. Codependency. The culture of UBFism is held together by giving a new purpose to your relationships with other people. That purpose is of course to honor the UBF leaders and pass on the UBF spiritual heritage. Your relationship with your spouse is made into a business-like co-working relationship. Your relationship with your own children is made into a machine-like bond. Any relationship that is deemed to hinder the spread of UBFism is cut off. Pregnant mothers often suffer the most. The pressure of performing and meeting the standards of the group often ignore pregnant mothers' needs. Children are often sent to babysitters 6 or 7 nights a week. At times, such as when the cost of a babysitter gets too high, young children are left alone for a 2 or 3 hour meeting. Parents, friends, and relatives of people who begin weekly Bible study in UBF often notice distressing changes in their friends' or relatives' behavior. Suddenly, they don't want to spend time together with their friends and families anymore, particularly on weekends. They don't come home regularly either. They start to miss important family events because a meeting in their new church seems to be more important to them. They start neglecting their university duties or other duties. When asked what's going on, they are either reluctant to speak or are speaking exuberantly and in a strange way about God and their lives. They start using words and arguments that don't seem to be their own, but seem somehow imposed on them. All this indicates that something is wrong with the group they have joined. In the beginning, the shepherds appear as friends. Later, however, they change roles and appear as shepherds and spiritual directors for the invited student, who is considered their sheep. The personal shepherd will continue to make weekly Bible study appointments with their sheep, where they talk for 1 hour or longer, not only about the UBF Bible study question sheet, but also about the student's problems and distress. It feels good to have somebody to talk to every week who seems to be friendly, mature, and wise, and seems to listen to all your problems. Slowly, as the students become dependent on the love and attention shown to them, the shepherds become more demanding. Thus, the new recruit eventually forms an unhealthy codependent relationship with their shepherd and new UBF family. Emotions are suppressed in a somewhat unique way in UBFism. Emotions are not merely suppressed, they are redirected. Similar to other conservative or extreme ideologies, UBFism teaches you to ever be gracious and views all negative type emotions as bad or unspiritual. Anger or sadness or sentimentality are viewed as signs of Satan's attack. These things result in many fake smiles and superficial, emotionless relationships. And an often overlooked aspect of this codependent relationship is the use of money. One of the control mechanisms of Uberism is indeed money. Not in the profit sense, but in the offering sense. There are some leaders who live rather well off and far better than the typical UBF house, church, family, but the trend is not to be extravagant with money. UBFism is not rooted in making a profit, but in making offerings. In exchange for the love bombing and gifts of Bible study, the members are expected to express the gratitude with offerings. Since there is no documented, agreed upon plan for much of the offering money collected, the money piles up. As of 2014, the group was worth just over 13 million US dollars according to the Evangelical Council of Financial Accountability's publicly reported numbers, ECFA. What is the plan for this money? I asked many people at UBF, but no one knows for sure. Weekly tithings is strongly enforced. At one time, individual offerings were displayed on large posters on the walls of the basement in the Chicago UBF building. That practice has stopped, but the leaders often still run reports of everyone's weekly offering. They tend to make judgments about people based on these weekly offerings. If a person's offering declines, some training is devised. If a person's offering goes up, they offer much praise and give such a person more opportunities in the ministry. In addition to weekly offerings, the group pressures members to attend 3 or 4 conferences per year, each with registration and travel cost. When guests from other UBF chapters arrive, there is the cost of serving these guests. There are many special offerings collected throughout the year as well, such as Christmas offering, Easter offering, and New Year's offering. When a member gets a new job or a pay raise, they are strongly encouraged to offer the entire first paycheck as a first fruits offering. Thus, money becomes a subtle yet powerful control mechanism. Beyond the intense offering schedule, UBFism leads to unwise financial decision making, such as giving up better jobs in order to stay in the city where your UBF chapter is located, or selling your house at a loss in order to move to a new city to set up a new chapter UBF or to move closer to the campus. In time, the members become dependent on their shepherds for financial decisions. For example, this statement by a foreign member exemplifies how financial decisions are influenced in order to bind your life more to the group. Quote, "A year ago, the director asked me if I would consider selling my house and move closer to the university so that I could participate in the ministry more often. He said that I can use the money I get from selling my house to buy a new one closer to the campus and begin using it for a Bible house and possibly having worship service there. He said if I did it, God would bless me abundantly for my sacrifice. He said that this was God's plan for my life, to sell my house and dedicate my entire life to the ministry, UBF. He talked as if it was definitively God's plan for me." End quote. Anonymous former Texas UBF member. Messiah complex. The spirituality of UBFism might best be described as a vending machine spirituality led by leaders suffering from a Messiah complex. As a UBF shepherd, I felt it was my God-ordained calling to save the world, one lost student at a time. I felt it was my job to not only purify myself, but lead other students to purify themselves. Excuse me. This is an offshoot of pietism, where students are kept excessively busy with all kinds of meetings. The emphasis is on overcoming challenges with quantity and perseverance. One student failed an exam 10 times. She was then asked to keep retaking it another 10 times. Instead of learning from failure and respecting the independent decisions and desires of the students, UPFism is a brand of spirituality that is rooted in aimless futility. Perseverance is a good thing, to be sure, but persevering in failure leads to hopelessness. It is much better to learn from failure, make adjustments, and redefine your goals. UPFism says, however, that the goal remains fixed. If you cannot achieve your goal, then you are the problem, not the goal. The primary thought is that the amount of times you pray is directly related to how much God will do for you. Often we pray 3,000 times for 3,000 summer Bible conference attendance. Other times we pray 10,000 times for 10,000 house churches. We had spiritual math, such as if 100 people pray 5 times a week for 20 weeks, we would have 10,000 prayer instances. And we expect God to raise that number of house churches. Of course, this never really worked out. Genuine spirituality is also qualitative and does not work like a mechanical system. Another aspect of the Messiah complex found in UPFism is the spiritual doctor phenomenon. UBF shepherds tend to see themselves as having the ability to diagnose all kinds of spiritual diseases and problems. The shepherds sometimes talk of identifying lazy demons, sports demons, food demons, and all sorts of supposed spiritual problems. If you don't have issues, your UBF shepherd will make up one for you. This Messiah complex is full of many contradictions. Although the UBF shepherds often claim to be expert spiritual doctors, they rarely have any solution except doing more one-to-one Bible study. They often claim to have the cure for life's problems, but the cure tends to be worse than the disease they supposedly identify. The one who claimed to be the actual Messiah, Jesus Christ, instituted several sacraments. At UBF, these Christian sacraments are typically ignored. This is a glaring hole in the spirituality found in UPFism, the absence of Christian sacraments. Recently, UBF tried to appear more like a normal Christian church, so some chapters try to hold Holy Communion at random intervals. They sometimes do baptism, but the ceremony is odd and not like the historical Christian baptisms. As might be expected, the group uses these as control mechanisms as well. For example, I was told that if I did not get baptized by UBF, I would not be allowed to marry or be sent out as a UBF missionary. Indeed, UBF shuns the unorthodox Christian sacraments and has created their own sacraments of testimony sharing, recruiting on campus, and arranged marriage. As a result of all this, I formed a codependent, intertwined bond with the lives of the other members of our fellowship, and I failed to notice not only the cracks in the mirror, but also the happy shepherd mask I was wearing. And that concludes Identity Snatchers Chapter 2. Thank you again for listening, and until next time.